Good morning. So I'm assuming I have about 35 minutes to speak and about 20 minutes for interaction, right? Okay. I think there are about 4 topics today, one of which is also the topic of idea of India. It just so happens that it's difficult to speak on that topic without talking about history, and it's difficult to talk on history without talking about the idea of India. So I'll try not to cross my topic and step into the territory of the other speaker. I'll try and use only those aspects which are strictly relevant for my topic. How many students of law do we have here? Okay. And how many students of humanities other than law? Political science? Okay. Sociology? Okay. Journalism? Fantastic. Anybody from the science stream? Okay. That's a welcome sight, considering that this topic rarely invites participation or attracts participation from the non-humanities stream. I'll just spend a few minutes talking about myself, and this is not meant to be an advertisement as a lawyer. I'm just setting the context of my experience and what is it that I will be speaking on. I'm not a trained historian. I'm just an average student of history. I'm just someone who has a huge passion for the subject. I'm someone who sees a lot of value in reading the subject, in understanding history and its relevance on a day-to-day basis. So it makes sense for someone like me who loves the subject to read about it, to understand its value. But why should everybody read history? What is the point? How does history help you on a day-to-day basis? Can anybody help me understand this? What is the relevance of history at all? Why do you need to read history? How does it help you? Does it help you get a job? I don't think so. I'm not sure. Unless and until you're interested in academia or you're looking at some kind of a policy making role, I don't see what is the point of history. If someone wants to simply look at a subject from a utilitarian standpoint, which is isse kitna paisa ban sakta hai, let's ask that straight blunt question. History is perhaps the last as far as the list of priorities go. It's either engineering, or it has to be medicine, or you get into the other professions such as law or chartered accountancy. What value does history add? History को अगर आप simple language में कहेंगे, what does it stand for? Please feel free to volunteer with answers. I understand that it's bound to get interactive after the first 35 minutes, but I just want to get a few answers. What is the meaning of history? Why do you need to understand history? History को अगर आप एक शब्द में कहना चाहते हैं, just give me a पर्यायवाची शब्द of history. Give me a synonym of history. इतिहास is translation. वो तो अनुवाद हुआ. Okay. Is it possible for you to crudely equate history with identity? Is it possible to say that history is where you come from, who you are, and how did you arrive at where you are today? Is it possible to make that statement? Right? It's possible. Okay. So I'll give you 3 words. Or rather, let's start with the first 2 words. There is a word called country and there is a word called nation. इन दोनों में कोई अंतर है, फर्क है? है. What is the difference? What is a country? What is a nation? Simple English. Yes, please.
Country belongs to just a land.
Right, sir.
Whereas nation belongs to a people, culture, and everything.
Fantastic. This is the simplest and the best possible example or explanation of these 2 words. So, since this happens to be a session that's organized in Dr. Ambedkar's university, one of the finest works of his that I have come across, and I'm still in the process of reading and understanding and digesting, is his beautiful book called Pakistan or the Partition of India. Anybody who has a semblance of interest in these 2 topics, anybody who has a semblance of interest in understanding what were the circumstances in which India was partitioned, what were the questions that people were faced with, please do read this. But apart from talking about the specific issue of Pakistan, the first few chapters are dedicated entirely to understanding three things. Dr. Ambedkar discusses three aspects. One, हिस्ट्री या इतिहास का महत्व क्या है. टू, कंट्री और नेशन में फर्क क्या है. थ्री, नेशन क्या होता है. These three questions are beautifully addressed. So, sir mentioned quite a few points about us having to be united, that all of us should forget our identities and we should think of us as Indians first. I don't think that's possible, sir. At least not in this country. For all practical purposes, India may be Bharat Ganarajya, but this is actually United States of India. For all practical purposes, multiple states with their own distinct identities have come together to believe in what is going to be the topic of the next speaker, the idea of India, the idea of Bharatvarsh. But why do they come together in the first place? Why do people come together? What is so common about, let's say in undivided India, a Peshawari Pathan and a Tamilian from Tamil Nadu? In dono mein to koi, at least to the common man's eye, there is no connection, there is no similarity. One is perhaps 6.5 feet tall, of a different complexion altogether, of a different build altogether. And someone from Tamil Nadu has a very different build altogether, different physical features, different ways of eating, different ways of conducting himself. And yet, there was a time when we thought that all of us belonged to the same nation. So, is nation defined by physical features, language, race, what? So, Dr. Ambedkar comes out with a fantastic point where he cites several sources and he says, a country is a landmass which provides people with a karmbhumi, a field of work for them to act upon and to create their own futures. So people plus country, the geography plus the subject, which is the person, environment plus subject makes a nation. This is important for us to understand. But then the question is, how many people of different thought processes, worldviews and languages can come together to form a nation? So he answers this in a beautiful way to say, a nation is decided only by two things. Past plus present is equal to nation. That means a majority of people should have a shared view of the past and should have at least an overlap of aspirations ki hame aage kahan jana hai. Unless and until both these ingredients are satisfied, you can't call it a nation. So assume for a moment, 50% of the country believes that Alamgir Aurangzeb was a tyrant, was an oppressor. 50% of the country believes, nahi ye to hamare wali hai, that he is someone who is a role model worthy of emulation. That shows a fundamental problem or a fault line in the society. आप किसको पूछते हैं और किसको नफरत करते हैं या किससे नफरत करते हैं, that matters, because that tells you how many areas of commonality you share and how deep is the division on issues that relate to your identity. Therefore, unless and until there is a shared view of your past and a shared vision of your future, there is no concept of a nation. There is no concept of a single nation. There is no idea of a single nation. Now, why is history relevant today? For academics and people who love history as a subject, you don't need to give them a specific incentive or a reason to love the subject. They are drawn to the subject. उनको कोई लोभ देने की जरूरत नहीं है, इंसेंटिव देने की जरूरत नहीं है. लेकिन जिनको हिस्ट्री पसंद नहीं है या उसमें रुचि नहीं है, how are you going to attract them? I'll make it very relevant to you. Right from reservations, right from the two-nation theory, right from the Aryan invasion theory, कि भारत के लोग कहाँ के हैं, all these have now become relevant in the discourse of this country in its day-to-day national discourse. Tell me one aspect of Indian politics which is free of identity politics today. Language is an issue, sect is an issue, religion is an issue, caste is an issue, water is an issue, everything is an issue. And it all boils down to identity. If it all boils down to identity, how is it possible that history doesn't find enough traction? History plays a huge role. When people in the 1917 to 1970s were hounded out of Tamil Nadu, history was used to hound them out on the basis of the Aryan invasion theory, saying some castes are people who have come from the north and these are the remnants of the Aryans. They are not Dravidians, they are not true Dravidians, kick them out. When Gujarat was formed, it was previously part of the Bombay Presidency. When Gujarat was carved out of Bombay Presidency, it was based on a certain identity. When Telangana was split for Andhra Pradesh, it is based on a certain identity. It's not economics, it's not always economics. Economics does play a certain role. But beyond that, it is a question of identity. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who doesn't know history doesn't know who he comes from or who he is and where he comes from. He doesn't know who he is at all. He is a person who is rootless. He is a person who is deracinated. But some might say, I don't care. History really doesn't affect me. I am someone who's interested in earning my livelihood, having a good life, a good wife, and get out of the place. That's it. I'm not interested in anything else. Sure, fantastic. You can abandon your identity. You have that choice of abandoning your identity, but when you exercise that free will, you realize that it is a decision that only you have taken. But somebody who continues to associate that identity with you will never let go of that. As long as that identity continues to stick to your soul, to your body, he will continue to have a problem with that identity, even if you let go of that identity. You can say, I have a problem with a certain community, or a certain community has a problem with me. I might as well leave this place and go to someplace else. I'll go and settle perhaps in Vancouver or in the United States of America, in the golden pastures of California. Wherever you want to go, you go. But the fact that you are a certain person and you come from a certain background will continue to haunt you unless and until you convert or you change. Therefore, anybody who devalues identity, according to me, has simply not understood the value of history. Let's think of it this way. The Communist Party of China, for all practical purposes, subscribes to the Marxist ideology, and then the next version, which is the Maoist ideology. And therefore, according to them, they believe in the class war. According to them, there is the oppressed and there are the oppressors. This is the only two camps in which the world is divided. And therefore, for the next 30-40 years, they went about destroying every symbol of Chinese culture under all sorts of names. The Great Leap, the Long Revolution, this and that, they kept on doing it. But today, they've decided that the vision of China, the vision of the Middle Kingdom, is central in order for them to build a grand narrative if they have to plan the next 100 years. So, an avowedly communist regime, which is not supposed to have any belief in culture and which rejects the idea of history altogether, has realized the value of history. So no matter what you do, history is a subject that you can't run away from. So that's point number one. Point number two, Sir mentioned that we must forget all our differences and divisions and we must think as Indians. I will make a bold and perhaps a politically incorrect statement. सत्य के बिना शांति तो सुलभ नहीं है, ना ही मुमकिन है. Unless and until the truth is ironed out, it is thrashed out, it is discussed, it is debated and presented with honesty, there is no question of lasting peace. You will continue to brush truth and facts and history under the carpet, but the more you try and do it, कूड़ा तो वहां पे जमा होता रहेगा एंड किसी दिन सबको नजर आ ही जाएगा. The more you try to suppress a spring, the more it is bound to rebound. Therefore, it is important to face reality, to accept reality, to accept a few facts, because only then you will come to a common ground. You will come to the same page. And only when you come to the same page, it is possible for you to have a discussion on yahan se aage kahan jana hai, kaise badhna hai. But until you arrive at that consensus, there is no question of you thinking of a common shared vision. There are multiple ideas of India as far as this country is concerned, for the simple reason that history has become the most contested battleground through political ideologies. Which is why it is important for us to recontextualize Indian history. Have you ever heard of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of the South African government, which was set up after Nelson Mandela came to power? ये Truth and Reconciliation Commission होता क्या है? Simple. Before Mr. Mandela came to power, or Dr. Mandela came to power, it was a white minority which was ruling the country. Just like it was in Zimbabwe before Robert Mugabe came to power. Subsequently, they lost power and they gave way to the ANC, the African National Congress. Now, the African National Congress decided that you can't kick these people out. They have lived here for generations. And we have to coexist. But there is such deep hatred and mistrust between the white community and the African community that it is impossible for them to sit in a room and have a civilized dialogue. So they decided, उनको मुझे गाली देना है और मुझे इनको गाली देना है, क्यों ना एक रूम में बैठ के ये कर लें और आगे बढ़े, डिसाइड करें कि आगे करना क्या है. So which is why they decided to constitute the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Why? It is important for history to be documented where all the barbarism and all the cruelty that the African community was subjected to by the white minority was acknowledged. It was accepted. And at least by way of a token reparation, harjana bharna pada. That people who have benefited out of this slavery and people who have benefited out of this oppression must pay a certain price for what they have done to others as a token apology. That's the very argument that Mr. Shashi Tharoor is making to the United Kingdom when it comes to reparations to India. He says it's not a question of quantum, it's not a question of quantity, it is a question of principle. So the Truth and Reconciliation Committee is important because then you realize people who have, let's put it in Indian context. Assume that there is a certain community which came part of the invasion horde which came to India 1,000 years ago, let's say in 700 AD when Sindh was invaded for the very first time. Can you hold the son or the grandson or the prapautra responsible for what the grandfather did? It's impossible. You can't hold him responsible. He was not there. He did not play a role. His free will did not play a role. Therefore, you can't hold people who live in the present responsible for the actions of their ancestors. ये बात जो है बहुत जगहों पे लागू होती है, चाहे अब हिंदू कास्ट की बात करें या फिर बाकी कम्युनिटीज की बात करें. It applies both ways. Therefore, if you can't kick these people out, and it is important for us to talk about living together, the only way for us is to agree that you did this to me, this was wrong. The problem as far as India is concerned is truth and reconciliation have never been part of our historical discourse. They have never been part of our history textbooks. They have never been part of our historical curricula because we have tried to brush under the carpet everything that has happened since 700 AD. We have tried to brush under the carpet the reality because we are scared of it. There could be a good reason. People might say, अगर आप पास्ट की इतनी बात करना शुरू करेंगे और आप खोदने लगेंगे कि इतने लोग मारे गए, इतने लोगों का बलात्कार हुआ, इतने लोग बंदी बनाए गए, so many people were made slaves, and they were dragged across the Hindu Kush. You say all of these things, it might incite violence. Therefore, perhaps the best thing to do is to brush it on the carpet and behave as if it doesn't exist. In the last 70 years, ever since we decided that perhaps the best way to deal with the situation is create a separate country and establish a separate country, has this proven to be a success? I don't think so. Every few years there's a problem. Every few years allegations are hurled against each other. Every few years we go back to what happened 2000 years ago or 1200 years ago. So to behave as if history is not relevant and has not mattered is stupidity. That is the behavior of an ostrich. Therefore, it is important to recontextualize history. It is important to recontextualize history and take it from the hands of those people who are intent in propagating a defeatist mindset. I'll give this a different twist altogether. If you read history textbooks on a regular basis, all you hear and all you read is, for the last 2000 years, or at least 1200 years, India's history has been nothing short of a monstrous defeat after defeat in the face of invasions. That is the only thing that you read. And when a child reads this over and over again from let's say from the 5th standard to the 12th standard or the 10th standard, that means in his formative years, he is being told that he is part of a defeated nation, of a defeated community. And when that happens, it is bound to affect a sense of self-esteem. It reflects in your body language, it reflects in your approach to everything. Nobody wants to be told in this country, despite all these barbaric invasions, despite all the monumental and wholesale destruction and genocide that was meted out to the people native to this country, we are still here. Greek history abhi sirf kitabon mein hai. The original Greek history. Roman history is only in books. You've heard of this place called Constantinople in history. What is it known as today? Istanbul. What is known as the Royal Mosque in Turkey was previously the Hagia Sophia Church. You don't have a trace of African traditions and pagan roots. Has anyone been to Northeast Europe or Northwest Europe, the Baltic states? So I had the opportunity to go to Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Of all the places that I chose for a vacation, I chose these 3 countries, the Baltic countries. For the simple reason that if you go to that place, आपको हिंदी कानों में सुनाई पड़ेगा, संस्कृत आपको सुनाई पड़ेगा, because one of the closest languages to Sanskrit is Lithuanian. One of the closest languages to Indo-European languages or Indo-Aryan languages is Lithuanian. What is the connection? Does it prove that we are all actually the santan of invaders, the Aryans? Or does it prove that log yahan se bahar gaye the? Have you read the recent news reports that the light complexion of the European is perhaps the contribution of an Indian who left this place 10,000 years ago? This news report came out 2 days ago. It was an Indian ancestor who contributed to the fair complexion of the Europeans. That is what the new study says. So we are fighting on complexion. We are fighting on who is an Aryan and who is a Dravidian, when there is a decent chance that as opposed to the Aryan invasion theory, you should be looking at out of India theory, that people left this place and went outside. Why is this important? Because people are asking for a Dravidian Nadu today. People are saying that 4 states in the south or 5 states in the south should form a separate country because they form part of the Dravidian language and the Dravidian culture, and they're not part of the larger Indian culture. That is the extent to which history is being used to drive a wedge between people. People who are saying that we may speak different languages, vesh bhusha alag ho sakta hai, everything can be different, but there is a common sutra that ties all of us, are being branded as right-wingers, as fascists, as people who are intent on thopifying one culture on everybody else. And those people who are saying आप सब अलग हो, आप एक दूसरे के साथ बात ही नहीं कर सकते हैं, and people who are giving, let's say, food and water to separatist ideologies are being pushed as people with a liberal bent of mind. So if anybody says that history does not play a role in any of these discussions, I'm sorry, I would genuinely call him a stupid fellow, because he's blind to what is happening right in front of him. How many of you, is anybody here from Andhra, from Telangana? Telangana's Telugu dialect is slightly different from Andhra's Telugu dialect. In fact, it's vastly different. For the simple reason that what you know as Telangana today was under the rule of the Nizam for the longest of time. And the Nizam was a representative of the Mughals in the Dakkan. Dakkan is crudely put Dakshin, which is what has become Dakkan and therefore Deccan. So, thanks to that, and Hyderabad at that point of time, if you read, you should read this beautiful book called The Last Nizam, was a melting pot of Yemenis, of Arabs, of Rohilla Pathans, of Turkeys, and people from all over the Middle East and the Central Asian countries in that particular place. As a consequence, the Telugu language in that particular part of the country is vastly different from the coastal Andhra areas. So to speak, coastal Andhra has managed to retain the purity of its language, whereas this has taken a lot of influences from outside. So you can call the Telangana Telugu as an upper branch, to put it in Hindi, of the actual form of Telugu. Now we are being told that this Telangana Telugu is proof of the fact that there were two different communities altogether, and racial justifications are being created for why Telangana was always a separate entity historically from Andhra. This is how history is being used. You want to know more about history? Please read as to what is happening to the demographics in the Northeast thanks to illegal immigration. It will only tell you that over a point of time, a free living space will be created where the ratio and the demographic balance will be inverted altogether, and after a point of time, the third wave of separatism and the third round of partition will start in this country. Therefore, recontextualizing history is not a discussion that is meant for the educated elite sitting in air-conditioned rooms having wine or tea. It is meant for everyone to have a say in, because it is bound to affect you on a regular basis. The idea of India has already undergone a grotesque change in the last 15 to 20 years, and it is undergoing an even more grotesque change right in front of our eyes on a daily basis. We are now being told that Kashmir had nothing to do with Indian culture at all. That the history of Kashmir and the language of Kashmir, the culture of Kashmir, was always different and alien to that of India. So the Sharda Peeth had apparently nothing to do with India at all. So much so that the Kashmiri language is out on its way from Kashmir, and it is being replaced by the national language of Pakistan. And the national language of Pakistan is not even Arabic, it's Urdu. It's funny. Therefore, the central message that I am trying to put forth is, kindly do not leave discussions on history only to the scholars, or only to the experts, or only to those who are in the business of influencing news or in creating news. You have a say in it. I don't know of this campus, but if you go to college campuses in Tamil Nadu, or you go to college campuses in West Bengal, history plays an important role in isolation of people, in segregation of people, and in targeting of people based on language, caste, and whatnot. It starts at that level and it will continue to the topmost level. But then, what has happened in the last 4 years, unfortunately, is, and I'll say this bluntly, even if it sounds politically incorrect and makes me an outsider, that history has never figured in the list of priorities of the current dispensation at the center. There is a specific ministry to address it. There are specific people who are charged with the task of recrafting Indian history. There are fantastic experts who are capable of advising the government on it. But unfortunately, there has been no change in it at all, except for symbolic changes here and there. Sanskrit को कहीं पे introduce कर दिया या कहीं से उसको निकाल दिया. उससे बस that's their contribution as far as history is concerned. If you look at CBSE textbooks, CBSE textbooks start only from 1 CE or 1 AD, which is the first year of the Common Era, or Anno Domini 1, as if India did not have an existence before that. You go to the Incredible India website, the tourism website, it repeats the same nonsense which Westerners have thrust on us, that Aryans from Central Asia came on horseback 2,500 years ago, and they invaded the Indus Valley civilization and the Harappan civilization. And what you know as India today is the product of that rape, that butchery, that savagery, and that invasion. This is the nonsense that's being peddled. And this is being peddled from the official website of the government of India. So if the government of India endorses this kind of untruth and this kind of historical distortion, foreigners are bound to latch onto it. Those who are interested in driving a wedge between Indians will certainly latch onto it. The next thing they'll say is that the Devanagari script is completely different from the script of the South. And since there is no bar on the top, it shows how fundamentally different we are as people. Therefore, a bar on the top of letters will decide that you and I are different entirely. That's going to decide the history of this country. Please understand that lack of historical sense and lack of identity is the reason that today Europe does not have an answer to the troubles that are facing it. There is a decent chance that 70% of the people in this audience might say, all I am interested is in vikas and development and nothing else. All I'm interested in is in increasing the livelihood and the standard of living of the people, and that's all. Europe has done it. Europe did it several years ago. But they don't have an answer to the identity crisis facing them today. इनके पास जवाब नहीं है कि इसको क्या करें, इस immigration के साथ कैसे deal करें. Because they don't know who they are, because they think it is wrong on their part to say that we are Europeans of a different heritage altogether, that we subscribe to a different set of values. They feel ashamed about professing their different values because it has become politically incorrect. What passes off as secularism in this country is called multiculturalism in Europe and United Kingdom. And these are basically two different names of the same animal, the same jantu, the same creature, which is political correctness, which is meant to brush aside facts, suppress facts, relegate it to the dustbin of history at the expense of history and at a huge cost to people. Development is important. Nobody doubts it. For the person on the street who struggles for 2 square meals a day, history gaya kude mein. Because what he bothers about and what he cares about and what he should be bothered about is his livelihood on a daily basis. There is no doubting it. But then, here's the funny part. You go to any 5-star or 7-star hotel in Delhi, you will find 6.5 feet tall, broad Sardar standing as the guard at the door. And then a white tourist decides to enter the place. You see a marked difference in his behavior immediately, wherein he bows down this namaste, and we treat this as Indian culture, this is our hospitality. Put yourself in the same shoes. Which European hotel or American hotel you've been to where you get the same treatment from their bartenders and their waiters? The problem is, servility has become synonymous with service mentality. These are two different things. Being hospitable is not the same as becoming a slave to somebody else. But unfortunately, if you're repeatedly told that for generations together, you have been slaves, you will continue to be slaves, your entire value system is a bunch of humbug and a load of superstition, you're bound to think of yourself as people who deserve to be treated like slaves. Have you heard of any incidents against Arabs in Australia? Can an Arab student be killed the way an Indian student is killed in Australia? I don't think so. Because they believe, one, sorry, there will be repercussions if you touch them. That's one. Two, Indians hai, humility is our central identity. That's our central feature. Humility, according to me, is the most misunderstood trait as far as Indian history is concerned. Humility simply means there could be someone better than me and recognizing the fact that there could be someone superior to me. But that does not translate to accepting that I'm inferior to everybody else. That is the definition of humility as far as India is concerned, and that repeats itself on a regular basis in the manner in which Indian history is projected. Do you know of the number of expansionist, let's say, wars or campaigns undertaken by the Cholas in the Southeast Asia? How many Chola kings are we aware of? Are we aware of the fact that it took 5 different armies of 5 different sultanates to destroy the Vijayanagara Empire? That it was an unequal war? And the rampage of Hampi went on for 6 months. It took several years for people, or rather several months for people to destroy one civilization or one empire. But all we hear is a tomb which is built for somebody's second or third wife. And I suspect he had a wife after that. And one of his daughters also performed the role of a wife later. This is a fact. When Shah Jahan was imprisoned along with his daughter by Aurangzeb, there are written records which clearly say that his daughter effectively had to take up the role or don the mantle of a wife. And yet that tomb is supposed to be the symbol of his love for his wife. Great, accepted. Is there nothing else worth showcasing in India? If you go to any country, even in America, the worst or the latest that they can show, or the earliest that they can show, is a structure running before about 300 or 400 years. 300, 400 years, I think there will be a temple in a village in this country, in every village. Most temples, at least in the south, are at least 2,500 years old or 2,000 years old. The reason why I have to talk about the south is most temples of the north have effectively, how do I put it, which anyway we can't talk about. It would be extremely politically incorrect. It could hurt a lot of sentiments. It could hurt so many sentiments that I will find a lot of death threats and hate mails coming to me the next day. So I'd rather not talk about it. But then, if you really want to read about it, please read Sri Sitaram Goel's book, What Happened to Hindu Temples. He gives a detailed exposition of destruction by destruction, the number of temples that were destroyed. Read the books of Dharampal. Read the books of Sri Conrad Elst. Read the books of David Frawley. Read the books of Michel Danino. Read Max Muller. Max Muller is supposed to be the one who started the Aryan invasion theory. But then if you read his books and his teachings, in fact there is a beautiful book, it's a short book that you get on Kindle, India, What It Can Teach Us. Just read it, it's barely 80 to 100 pages. A brilliant exposition of how he believes that there is not a single thought in the world that has not been thought of in India. And something that does not exist in India cannot exist elsewhere. That is a German saying. Not that a German saying makes it great, but then since we are fans of people who come out of India, I might as well put it that way. It has to make a difference. I wish I were a skin tone lighter. My statement would perhaps carry more weight. So, to cut a long story short, recontextualizing history is not about knowing certain facts, certain dates. It is first of all about understanding the value of history and then focusing on the facts. If the mind is not a fertile ground to receive facts because it does not see the value in receiving those facts, आप facts भरते जाइए, उससे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा? जब तक perception और attitude में कोई change नहीं होगा, सत्य का उस पर कोई असर नहीं होगा, कोई प्रभाव नहीं पड़ेगा. Thank you. Questions, please. I'll go there.
Good morning, sir. This is Ambrish, a final year student from Gujarat National University. And thank you so much for this insightful speech that you gave to us. It was very informative for us to hear it out. But, sir, I would like to be the advocate is diabolical. I would want to present a different aspect to it. You said that we have to save our heritage, that we haven't given a good thought till now. We have to understand, like you said, for example, Vijayanagar Empire or the Rajraj Chol, Rajendra Chol and their expeditions in Southeast Asia and their expansion. We have to take pride in our heritage. But, sir, my question is that we just cannot go on to, fabricate things. Like there are people who are saying that Taj Mahal was a Shiva temple, or Qutub Minar, when it was built on the rubbles of a series of Jain temples. So what do you have to say about that attitude? That is something which I personally and many Indians, millions of Indians cannot accept at this point of time. Thank you, sir.
Fantastic question. There are two levels of answers. Please take a seat. One, those who indulge in this kind of fabrication and who end up making statements like संस्कृत से तो बेहतर लैंग्वेज हो ही नहीं सकता है कंप्यूटर प्रोग्रामिंग के लिए. भाई आपने कोई उस पर रिसर्च किया है, कुछ शोधन किया है, आपने इस पर कोई रिसर्च आर्टिकल लिखा है? You cite some random article which was written on a different subject altogether to make these kind of outlandish claims. I'm not saying maybe the statement is entirely wrong. I'm simply saying these statements are made without any kind of basis. And that does grave injustice to people who are actually presenting facts. You're actually harming your own team by kicking a self-goal, by making these kind of statements. When you have facts to support you, why use myth? You don't need the Baisakhi of a myth to present your case when the facts themselves speak for themselves. So what is the Latin phrase for it? Res ipsa loquitur, right? So allow the facts to speak for itself and it will speak louder than your myth. Using some random Shastra calling the Vaimanik Shastra written by Bharadwaj saying that तब हम जानते थे कि पुष्पक विमान कैसे बनता है. Prove that at least. Take it to its logical conclusion, right? Now to answer this question at a different level, this is supporting you and then is a point which perhaps goes against you in a different way. Are you a student of history? You like history is a different thing, but are you a trained student of history? You're not, okay. Are you an archaeologist? Are you a paleontologist? Okay. Therefore, surely you and I are not in a position to say that somebody is making a stupid claim. That's one. Okay. Two, what is basically the case going on before the Supreme Court, and the next date of hearing is the 6th of April, is a similar case, the Ram Janmabhoomi case, of which I'm a part. Therefore, I can say this with confidence. 4,300 pages is the total volume of the judgment written by the Allahabad High Court, running into 3 volumes. A good part of it relates to the excavation report of the ASI. And when you read it, you realize how is it that all of this was suppressed and never brought out in news reports. The existence of a Vaishnava temple below has never been brought out in news reports because people have focused only on the event of December 6, 1992, not what happened before, not what happened after. They are fixated only on that. That's one. Not that I agree with it, that's a different issue altogether, but be that as it may, those facts have become irrelevant. Two, in light of that particular example, can you dismiss other examples? Are you in a position to say, when I confront you with the example saying, this has happened in Ram Janmabhoomi, why should it be wrong for somebody to say, this could have happened in some other place as well? You go to the Gyanvapi mosque in Kashi, half of it is a temple, the top is actually a mosque. So you have another example right there. There used to be a board outside this place called Quwwatul Islam Mosque in Delhi, which board clearly said that the stones of that place and the steps of the place was made out of the rubble and the debris of X number of Jain temples and Hindu temples. That board is gone now. It does not exist because it's socially impalatable. That statement is or unpalatable. That's something that nobody wants to say. So that example exists. In which case, we don't know. somebody could be right, somebody could be wrong, but I certainly have a problem with outlandish claims without support. Any statement of that sort. Somebody says Taj Mahal jo tha, ye Tejo Mahal tha. Australia jo tha, uska actual naam tha Astralay. Somebody made this kind of a stupid statement also. He said, boss, don't look for Sanskrit in every word. That can't happen. At least give credit that somebody else has a brain too and some other language could have come out on its own. So let's not make these kind of statements. You have a better case to prove, you prove that case. But the problem in this entire thing is a certain legislation that was introduced called the Places of Worship Act of 1991, which basically stops anybody from agitating a similar issue such as the Ram Janmabhoomi, saying that this is a temple, this used to be a temple, which has been forcibly converted to a different place of worship. We want to take it back. Except for the Ram Janmabhoomi, thanks to the law, you can't make a similar claim with respect to any other temple. That too, according to me, is patently unfair and unjust. Unfortunately, people should be talking about these issues, but they're hell-bent on manufacturing hoax and myths. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. Adesh Srivastava here. Basically, I am a student of the company secretary from the Institute of Company Secretary of India. But I am a student of history at a 12th class or 11th, 12th standard. You said earlier Truth and Reconciliation Committee in Africa. So I heard from my professor who is the advocate in High Court, Gujarat High Court, Udayan Vyas sir, the concept of the United States of America and we all know that our constitution preamble, we the people of India, we brought from the American preamble. The United States of America concept, Dr. Ambedkar says on account of discussion, why we not adopt the United States of America in that manner, United States of India. The idea of United States of India will not exist in the Indian context, because we have different culture and different language problem. The idea of Truth and Reconciliation Committee in India is set up. So I think it is not possible in India, because the many of the governments, different governments which came in power, like Congress and BJP, I am not supporter of any of the political party, but according to their perception, according to their committee set up by this ministry or set up by the government, read and write the report and make the clear about the things. So
I agree with
how
you.
it is possible.
See, I understand, and here.
So
Yeah, please. Go on.
my second question is.
So we are still on the first question. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. See, I can't disagree with you on one thing. As long as governments continue to be held hostage to popular sentiments and therefore vote bank politics and political arithmetic, it is impossible to expect them to take a decision in the interest of the country, because they will do everything which is in the interest of their political fortunes. And I don't think any party is an exception to this, not even I'd say a party with a difference. Okay? I think every party is the same as far as this issue is concerned. And we've seen this from 98 to 2004, and I think post 2014 also this has been the case. At least on these central issues of identity are concerned, there is no difference at all. But it is then for the people of the country to put pressure, and for people who are in a position to talk about it, and people who are in a position to understand the issue, to put some kind of a pressure and say, you can continue to keep fighting your election cycle on a regular basis, but kindly do something about this as well, because we don't want history to become the pawn in the hands of people who wish to run this country on the basis of dividing people. I'm not even a fan of a myth which helps unite people if that myth is based on untruth. Because aaj nahi to kal, doodh ka doodh aur pani ka pani to hona hi hona hai. It's only a question of time. A noble untruth is perhaps a greater evil than an evil truth, as far as I'm concerned, or a harsh reality. And to assume that people are incapable of digesting reality and incapable of digesting facts does intelligence to their maturity and does insult to their maturity and intelligence? Are we saying that Americans, South Africans are capable of digesting facts about their history, but Indians are incapable of doing so? Then how do you call yourself the descendants of the greatest civilization on earth? You can't even digest the truth. You can't handle the truth. To quote a popular movie dialogue, you can't seem to handle the truth as far as I'm concerned. The Virginia assembly, so to speak, of that particular state was supposed to be the launch pad of the Confederacy during the Civil War in America, meaning they were the ones who were supporting slavery, as opposed to the Yankees, the north of America, north of the United States, so to speak. But that Senate goes on to issue a public apology to the African American community for all its acts of slavery and its support of slavery. I would say two things have to happen in India as far as India is concerned when a Truth and Reconciliation Commission comes out. One, people who have committed caste atrocities must at least come out with a token apology for what has happened and say we will not support this in the future. And this can't happen. Second, people who take pride in the atrocious barbarity of their ancestors should say, sorry, we don't support this anymore. We can't treat them like our role models. The one book that I forgot to mention in my entire discussion was, please read a beautiful book by this gentleman called A.L. Priolkar on the Goan Inquisition. You read it, I can't think of a single Inquisition that has happened in Europe which matches the barbarity of this Inquisition. And it's not only Hindus who suffered. Indian Christians, Jews, everybody suffered as a consequence of this Inquisition. How people were burnt on the stakes and how they were hounded out. How temples were destroyed. That's a different history altogether. Goa today has a Portuguese character when you visit the place. But that is the consequence of a forced inquisition and a forced conversion. Those who accept a certain religion by conscience, it's their choice. You can't come in that way. But when it's imposed, then there is a certain problem. And when the fact of imposition is sought to be suppressed, then that gives rise to a different problem altogether. So, political let's say tug of war, ye to chalta hi rahega. It is important for us to decide as denizens of the future, is this the kind of history we wish to live with on a regular basis? And do we want history to become a political discussion, or do we want it to become a factual discussion in the interest of retaining the social fabric of this country? I think we have other questions. Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deepak. This is Bhavin Kothari. It has been an excellent speech. What you have done, it seems to me, is I'm either not a historian or whatever. I'm basically a professor teaching at the Design Institute, and it might have been a misfit here. But the point you have made is, I think the 30 minutes is not enough to kind of summarize whatever that large topic.
For longer.
Yeah, I do. So, I mean, my suggestion is that what you've essentially done is that you've created interest in that minimum limited 30 minutes. So having done that, and when we know now, we are thankful to Think India to have you on the board here, and then putting you in front of us. How do we follow this kind of work, and you and others in the digital medium, or we even otherwise, whichever way? I think.
Yeah, now that seems like a response about publicizing myself, and I'm not sure how that's going to come across. The one thing that I can confidently say is there is an organization that a certain like-minded group of individuals started called the Indic Collective Trust, and I am basically the mentor for its legal actions. It has a website, a fully functional website called indiccollective.org. So we do multiple things through that platform. One, we try and use constitutional means and the courts of law to right the wrong and say that this is not how it is supposed to be represented. In addition to that, we also support subject matter experts such as historians, public policy analysts, linguists, anthropologists, and subject matter experts from various fields, including economists, to try and present an Indic perspective, to say that this is something that smells of the soil of this country, that has its roots in the history of this country, in the traditions of this country, without sounding superior, which is to say that humse better to koi ho hi nahi sakta hai. I don't subscribe to the notion that India or Bharat is Mahan in every front or in every scene, but I do believe that there are a lot of things that we can learn from the past. So we try and push these narratives through that. Plus, I have a Twitter handle where I'm fairly regular, where if I don't have too much to contribute, I at least share what others have contributed so that people who follow me can read it, because I can't be an expert on everything. A lawyer tries to be, but he can't be.
Yeah.
So which is why I started off with a very clear disclaimer before, like they have in a movie, that while it may hurt sentiments, it is not meant to hurt sentiments. It is meant to state a few things boldly. At least in some places you should be able to say the truth, or at least speak your mind freely. Yes.
What's that Twitter handle?
It's at JSai Deepak.
Okay. And I mean, and just to further to your disclaimers, I mean, you also kept on saying that making politically incorrect whatever, but it didn't felt like that. I mean,
so that's perhaps because we are, perhaps I'm hazarding a guess, we are all like-minded.
You're more like a trained lawyer more than the historian, it seems. Anyway, excellent speech. Thank you so much.
Good morning, sir. My question is the current education system is that which Macaulay installed in our India?
Yes.
And are we by default leftist after completing our education? My question is our education system is left liberal, and after completing our education, and as far as I have been studied in ICSE, I am an ICSE student, and I have studied that, as you said in earlier in your speech also, that we have been taught like a defeated country, and we have not been glorified what other kings, our kings, as we say,
right,
have been, So is this impact of education system not allowing the youth to come out of their pseudo-secular garb and anti-left liberal garb that is been, covering all our students, that is not allowing to create the nationalist narrative throughout the nation?
Right. The answer to all three of your questions is yes, yes, and yes. And I think your question itself captures the problem beautifully. So there's nothing more that I have to contribute to that, except for two differences, very important differences. Do not have a problem with liberalism. Have a problem with people who self-style themselves as liberals and indulge in illiberal activities. Second, the way liberalism is understood in this country and is used in this country is very different from what it originally started off as. Okay? Two, India has now boxed itself into the two rings or two fences, right and left. And it is not consistent with or faithful to the original definitions of what are right and left. Okay? So perhaps we should start abandoning these terms and try and look for different perspectives. So we try and use a different language or a different terminology, saying the Indic perspective. Indic perspective is a perspective that is rooted in the traditions of this land, sees a commonality in a lot of things, is comfortable with opposing viewpoints. Let's understand one thing. Not every viewpoint or every school of thought in this country ever agreed with each other in the past. Be it Advait or Dvait or Mimamsa or Nyaya, everybody had a problem with each other. But I think the central feature of each school of thought was that it did not believe nobody else has a right to exist or survive. That exclusivist, exclusionary view, which says that I am the ultimate truth, the only way through to salvation is through me, after me there can be nobody else who will come and say that he is the messenger of God. None of these claims are made by any of these schools of thought. They say I am right for this reason, he is wrong for this reason, but they still continue to respect what Voltaire said, that I respect your right to exist and I respect your right to hold a certain opinion. That is the central feature. If there was a textbook example of open innovation ever in this country or ever in the history of the world, and particularly in the history of religion, in the history of philosophy, or rather in the context of philosophy, India is the best possible example for it. People keep saying that thanks to a certain invasion, Jativad aa gaya hai, Castevad aa gaya. I'm so sorry. If according to you this invasion took place 3,000 years ago and 2,500 years ago, the fact that that community continues to exist even after 2,500 years is proof of its ability to coexist and not proof of invasion. Otherwise, you should have only one identity. You don't. That is proof of it.
I'm sorry, we cannot take any more questions. We have to wrap up for the time limit, but you can personally interact with him. For the next session, I would like to request Amrish Tiwari to carry forward the proceedings.